Well, first I want to thank Reverend Larry for asking me to do this because it's a stretch. It's a big stretch. It probably won't be as funny as Reverend Larry or as casual because he does this every week and this is the first time I've ever tried. But I'll do my best to try and sort some ideas that hopefully will stimulate a new way of thinking that takes some of the gender wrapping off of Father's Day and gets to the core of what really authentic masculinity is about. So this is a Father's Day story, but it's one where we're going to try and see if we can't weave what would be a less gender-biased appreciation of what that authentic masculinity is all about. So before I start, I want to just acknowledge my spouse of many, many years. I won't say how many. Lala in the front row with me, who's provided me the ability to be a father. Thank you, dear. And my son Orion is in the back, which I'm really happy about. He's given me the greatest Father's Day present ever. He's going to make sure his other three siblings, his three sisters, get a chance to see this on a link he'll send them on YouTube. So he's making this available to them, and thank you, son. That's the greatest Father's Day present of all. Being a great father is like shaving. Really, no matter how good you shave today, you have to do it again tomorrow. Right? You can't do Father Day 1 and no Father Day 2. It starts, and if you're lucky and your children are lucky, it never ends. I think that, as you see from the experience we're about to have, I'm going to approach Father's Day from the auspicious way of looking at it as authentic masculinity. And that's a very different perspective. You see, everyone is capable of experiencing authentic masculinity, regardless of their gender. Just as men are capable of accessing the divine feminine within themselves, every female is capable of accessing authentic masculinity. It isn't about gender. It's about the male principle. It isn't about a white-haired, muscular figure on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It's about the divine experienced as the male element, without the testosterone overlay, which has been a cultural heritage. And don't worry, guys, I will get back to testosterone at the end. Historically, women are left out of Father's Day reflections. Why is that? Is it because we assume that the word father implies only a biological imperative? If so, we really need to recall all the tens of millions of women, single-parent women, in this nation alone, who have to be both a mother and a father to children who have no biological male to play that role. And when such a woman plays that father role, in addition to her role as female caregiver, what is she really doing? The women I know who have found themselves in this situation literally try to understand what a biological male would bring into their child's life, if that male were present. They try to balance their transmission of values that embrace both a male and a female dynamic. That isn't a gender-based observation. It's about something much more fundamental. It's about attempting to capture, in essence, the virtues of the male aspect of the divine, which all men and all women are capable of accessing. To lovingly share the essence of the male aspect of the divine, and to communicate it effectively is what fathering is really all about, regardless of the gender of the person transmitting that sensibility. In that sense, this is a Father's Day story that is gender neutral. This story is about what it really means to be a father. Most of us have a sense of what the maternal instinct is and how it feels when we either encounter it or experience it. For convenience, let's call it the feminine principle, which relates to us as the body of her body. It is the feminine ability to cocoon the child in an other-centered envelope of love and support, which is the natural extension of that other having been once literally a growth within the woman's body. It is the principle of holding inside ourselves the growing love for another of our kind with a fierce pride and determination until that is being able to, that individual, to physically and metaphysically exit the protective cocoon or womb to become an independent being of their own. Once separated, the female principle strives to nurture, that is, to embrace with loving support the safety and development of that now separated being. Nurturing, however, is not uniquely a feminine attribute. The dictionary definition of nurture as a noun is to, quote, care for and encourage the growth of the other. As a verb, that definition is, quote, the process of caring for and encouraging the development of someone or something. Those definitions are gender neutral. Even though we often think of the female as the nurturing gender, that is not inherently so. In fact, one of the dictionary examples of nurturing that you'll find is, quote, my father nurtured my love of art. It would be great if after you leave here this morning, you think of all the ways you have seen men act in a nurturing manner, and you'll experience how this characteristic is applicable to both men and women. All you've had the experience of knowing male persons who are very nurturing and deploy it so extraordinarily well that we become excited to see a male who is willing to let their nurturing side be so transparent. There are many other ways the feminine principle expresses itself in relationship to other human beings. Some are derived from millennia of evolution, and some are derived from a conscious awareness of what it truly means to be feminine as opposed to merely female. I'd love to continue on this theme, but I'll save that for Mother's Day, which will be aimed at the feminine in all of us, especially men. For today, however, we need to look at what it means to be a father. In addition to nurturing, an entry point to this more fundamental question of what that authentic masculinity is really all about. Let's start by acknowledging what we've all come to learn about what masculinity isn't. Most of us in this room would readily agree that the image of masculinity served up to us in the 50s in our media, and specifically by the persona of John Wayne in movies, is not a true picture of the authentic masculine. That version of testosterone-driven power, a physically muscular hero with a certain gruffness, headstrong determination, unflinching ego, and a half-blind male attitude is not authentic masculinity. It may be a good movie, but it's not authentic masculinity. I'd say it's confused masculinity. Look at these two separate characterizations for a moment, or stories, as a way to bring this picture into sharp focus. If I asked you to picture a John Wayne type character who unthinkingly and with a domination complex beat his child, quote, for their own good, close quote, because he believed that being a father was about, quote, teaching, close quote, discipline to his children and being a strong example of manliness. If such an example were to appear before us, what would our reaction be? That picture you see is a story of what stern fatherhood has often been confused with. It's what a lot of people thought God was until fairly recently, because they carried around this vengeful and prideful picture that was incorporated in the biblical teachings of the Old and the New Testament. Remember the words of that famous revolutionary preacher, Cotton Mather, who declared, "We are all sinners in the hands of an angry God." To him, God was that muscular, testosterone-driven, unfeeling disciplinarian who must be the authority who will punish us for our transgressions. Unfortunately, all too many of us were raised thinking that this image I'm painting is authentically what we were taught to believe was the entryway to the Father. Now, let's contrast that picture by having you draw up a radically different one. Please picture a visually effeminate-looking male who has chosen to have a child as a single father or as the fulfillment of a gay marriage, who you can observe instructing their child and how he or she can better care for themselves and how to be alert to the necessity of caring for others. That same male parent is seen in this story, is observed passing down the wisdom he has gained over his lifetime to his child about how to live effectively and lovingly in the world. Of these two stories, which better exemplifies the virtues of what we would think of as the nurturer? Who is exhibiting the best characteristics of good fatherhood, and why do we think that? It is true of all humans that our mothers gave us life, but it is equally true that the sperm of our biological fathers catalyzed that life into being and made it possible for our mothers to conceive. We are the products of that union of male and female, of egg and sperm. We humans are a unique blend of that male and female element biologically, and I would suggest metaphysically as well. You see, what we need to look at is what it means to have been, quote, catalyzed into being by our fathers. And let's remember that what makes for great fathering. From the moment we take our first breath, we begin to learn how to deal with life at an amazing rate. Apart from our direct experience of the physical world, we learn from the adults closest to us how to deal with the non-material world, the world of our own emotions, attitudes, beliefs, and of relationships. Authentic masculinity is the characteristic of nurturing, that is to say, assisting in the development of healthy emotions, positive personal and social attitudes, strong and appropriate beliefs, and the development of healthy relationships from the masculine point of view. For example, we often ascribe the protector role to men. For millennia, the men have been seen as the physically stronger gender, which saw its duty as, quote, standing guard to protect the women and children, close quote. Clearly a noble sentiment. But authentic masculinity is the place we come from, where we see the protector role from the perspective of a deeper understanding of that role we all have to play in being responsible for the well-being of other. That's something that female people do exceptionally well. Taking responsibility for the other's well-being is a better way to view the role of protector, which is quintessentially the historical masculine role that has morphed into something that optimally, to me, looks more like a guardian angel than it does John Wayne. What else can we look at to observe the way that authentic masculinity catalyzes us as growing humans? One of the most often quoted phrases in my generation, when we were growing up and failed to comport ourselves as well as our mothers would have liked or expected, was the dour phrase, quote, just wait till your father gets home. Now, this phrase, wait until your father gets home, uttered by our mothers, was meant to convey that the male in our family structure would come home and inflict corporal punishment upon us in response to what our mothers felt was inappropriate behavior. Mothers in those days saw corporal punishment as man's work rather than what mothers do. And why was corporal punishment sought in the first place? Because the belief was that once inflicted, corporal punishment would cause behaviors to change for the better. Maybe so, and maybe not. How many times were any of us subjected to any form of physical punishment and never once again erred in our behavior? It's not a permanent solution. So what was behind my mother's plaintive cry? Why did she need my father to punish us? Well, she was trying to get us to improve our behavior and felt that physical punishment was the best solution for remedial action to occur. She was saying, in effect, that the masculine role was to alter behaviors and that violence in doing so was the most effective, or at least the most efficient, mechanism to achieve that. So it was delegated to the most muscular and physical adult in the household, the male. Well, let's look behind that. Today, in a different time, where we are more aware of the masculine and feminine elements we all hold within, I believe my mother would have chosen a different approach. I believe she would have accessed her authentic masculine dimension in the moment where the behavior occurred, not when my father got home, in the moment when the behavior occurred, and sought to effect that change within us that corporal punishment meted out by my father would hopefully have achieved, and frankly didn't. She would have sought to provide correction in the moment that appealed to my level of awareness given my age at the time, and use that level of awareness to become the corrective action for my conduct rather than awaiting corporal punishment to occur many hours later. Today, the type of corporal punishment I'm speaking about would be illegal. What do we do today? Whether we are disciplining children as males or females, there's no exemption for males to beat children. And there's apparently never been much of a desire for women to do so, so we don't have to face that issue. It is, today, we create a timeout. We create a sit in the corner. We create a loss of television or restriction of video games or other privileges, and some other technique that would hopefully bring me, the child, into focus in that moment for the need to change. Doesn't that sound more effective? So if creating the change was reason for the male element to do what it did, couldn't we do that better? And can we do that by reaching into our own inner being, touch our authentic masculine, whether we're male or female, and strive to create the experience that optimizes the outcome we seek? That's not male or female. That's about what we have inside. Don't get me wrong. I don't blame either my mother or my father for the way they raised me. I'm grateful, very grateful. I had two phenomenal parents. They did the best they knew. They lived the stereotypes of male and female, of mother and father, as best they knew, and firmly believed these were inherently different gender roles. But when you get underneath what they were trying to accomplish, it was that they wanted to change behavior by utilizing disciplinary techniques which were physical and, as such, were more gender biased. I'm sure if they were alive today, they would wholeheartedly embrace a different approach, which would have seen my mother reach into her authentic masculine capabilities to extract exactly the right disciplinary approach that would yield the optimum result to catalyze, remember that word keeps coming up, as part of the male, authentic male experience, to catalyze my behavior onto a higher plane of appropriateness. That's what authentic masculinity does. Here's a quick story I'd like to share. I was flying back to Santa Barbara last Thursday, and the fellow in the seat next to me made a comment about why he lived in Santa Barbara, even though it was challenging for him because he worked in the Bay Area. As we discussed his situation, he reported that he used to live in the Bay Area and observed one night that his young son was experiencing a persistent nosebleed. It troubled him greatly. He said he felt, quote, terrible. What could he do? He was the father protector in his mind, and he couldn't figure out what was causing this constant nosebleed for his son. He tried to figure it out. He sought the advice of medical experts and yet was confounded. By luck, he was reassigned from the Bay Area to live in San Diego and continued to vigilantly observe, as any good father would, that the nosebleeds significantly decreased. At that point, he had a realization, and he recalled that he had been vaguely concerned about a source of pollution near their home in the Bay Area that his family had been exposed to. And he decided at that moment that perhaps environmental toxins might be behind his son's nosebleed. Armed with that observation, he decided to take a job in Santa Barbara on the theory that there would be even fewer environmental toxins there than there were, and he was encountering in San Diego. He moved to Santa Barbara, and in fact, the nosebleeds did stop. From that day to this, that father has never been willing to move his family out of Santa Barbara, no matter what the sacrifice in salary, economic opportunity, creative challenge, or any other inducement. He decided he would commute to whatever the job was in order to protect his children by raising them in the safest environment he could secure. To this day, he does that at great personal inconvenience to himself because he saw it as his duty to protect his son. As he finished telling me this amazing story, I asked him what was behind his desire to protect his son. He replied, well, that's what good fathers do. I acknowledged the nobility of that sentiment and asked him what it was behind his wanting to be a good father. He thought about it and said, I guess it's someone who puts protecting his family above personal convenience or even economic advancement. I asked him, that sounds good, but dig a little deeper. What did he mean by protect his family? After he gave it some thought, it means, he said, being willing to be responsible for the well-being of his son, even at the expense of his own career. That's very interesting, as I know lots of females who would do the same thing, and in a sense, they are tapping into their authentic masculine that is the protector. Being the protector isn't about standing at the door with a shotgun in some Western movie. It's about accepting the responsibility of parenthood and dealing with it moment by moment. That's a Father's Day story that women experience as frequently as men, just with different emotional constructs. It's not about being John Wayne. It's about being responsible for another. That's authentic masculinity. Here's my challenge. What are the most quintessential core ingredients of the most admirable qualities of masculinity that you can imagine, whatever they are? Now strip away the cultural John Wayne stereotype you grew up with or you saw, and reveal the essence of what all those humans have when they are in balance. Other assumed traits fathers are responsible for instilling in their children are similar in that something deeper lies within them. Here are a couple. Strength, often portrayed as outer, when we all know what lasts longer and succeeds far better is inner strength. Self-discipline. Integrity. Integrity, they say, a man's word is his bond. That's what fathers are supposed to teach. A man's word is his bond. A woman's word is not her bond? I would say it is. If I went through all of these, and Russ at the beginning, he mentioned dependability, to stand strong, loyalty, showing up, all these characteristics which are perceived to be the male principle in fathering, actually, if you strip away the superficial constructs that we are so ready to agree to and see with gender wrapping, if you strip that away, what you'll find are characteristics that we hold within ourselves as the divine feminine and the divine masculine. So that, to me, is authentic masculinity. And for each one of these, there is an absolute flip that you can see where the divine masculine within a woman can be absolutely as effective as the divine masculine within a man. I'd say the most important characteristic for either gender in attempting to probe the depths of authentic masculinity is to avoid the trap of choosing to see our children as having been stamped out in some way to become clones of ourselves and to attempt to raise them to be who we were, who we are, or who we hoped to be. That's probably the worst thing you can do as a parent. Because what we have to do as a parent when we access our inner authentic masculine self is we have to want to support the evolution of our children in the unique journey they are creating for themselves. That's real nurturing, and it's really authentically masculine. I think one of Great's opportunities, therefore, is to get beyond the appearances to substance. Searching out authentic masculinity is one of those opportunities that resolves so very many challenges in looking at our respective roles in the world. We want to locate and tap into our authentic masculinity, but we get caught up in the outward appearance of its expression right before our eyes if the person demonstrating that authentic masculinity happens to be wearing lipstick. My goal today is to challenge us to look at the most authentic expressions of the real masculinity that we will all carry within, and to strip those perceptions of the macho stereotypes that prevent us from seeing past the exterior expression of male and female to the more significant expression of masculine and feminine, regardless of what external package is found in. As I mentioned at the beginning of these remarks, we all have, regardless of gender, both the feminine and the masculine within us. God knows no gender. Our opportunity as fully enlivened human beings is to be able to touch and express both those sides of our innate humanity in order to be fully conscious, fully alive, and fully authentic. Once we do that, our limiting beliefs of what it means to be male or female falls away as we perceive who we truly are, fully balanced expressions of the divine in human form. To answer the age-old question best posed by Teilhard de Chardin, I truly believe we are not human beings on this planet having a spiritual experience from time to time. Rather, we are definitely spiritual beings having a human experience, which is a balance of that energy of masculine and feminine, which we became at the moment of conception. And we have to stay connected to that reality over and over and over again in order to father or nurture anything. I'd like to request that you leave here today thinking of father-like characteristics, fatherhood, as you have historically thought of them. See what pops into your head, and then talk to each other about it and probe what is left if you go deeper into those observations, into those characteristics that are uniquely emanating from the authentic masculine place within each of our most inner dimensions. That's where you find it. You find it in that place where you go with every meditation, with every prayer you utter. That's the home of authentic masculinity. Just as it's the home of authentic femininity. And our opportunity, I believe, Chardin is observing, is to live both in balance. In closing, let me share one of the things I've always appreciated about unity as a spiritual tradition. And I think this is probably the number one thing about unity that distinguishes from all the denominations. It was actually founded by a male and female jointly. That's probably why it is so balanced between dogma and heartfulness. Charles Fillmore and his co-founder spouse, Myrtle Page Fillmore, started Unity in 1889. It's a truly remarkable story about two truly remarkable people who together exhibited authentic masculinity and authentic femininity as a new spiritual tradition. There was no male authority figure. There didn't need to be one. And if one had have existed, Unity would not have emerged as the remarkably balanced denomination that it is. Back to that final comment about testosterone. Yes, I want to acknowledge it's not a bad thing. In fact, it's a very good thing when kept in balance. We've all seen what happens when it gets out of balance. For men, it's what keeps their biological clock ticking on time. It's what makes us able to do many of the things that we have to do every day as males. But it is not, in any way, shape, or form, a precursor to authentic masculinity. It's merely part of what comes with the package of being male. And I want to share that with you because it's important that we get, therefore, back to what that essential thing is. You know, since it's Father's Day, I have to end with this observation. There is a common misbelief that fathers are like parking spaces. The good ones are already taken. But as you can now appreciate, every human, male and female, potentially has that ability to reach deep within themselves, to that place where authentic masculinity resides, and provide all the fathering support that every child requires and deserves. And in case you want to just compare that with this final quote, some of you may know who Orson Seth Marden is. He was a gentleman who lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He founded Success magazine. He was one of the prominent people in the new philosophy at the time. He said this: "This is the test of your manhood. How much is there left in you after you have lost everything outside of yourself?" You see, what he was saying is, authentic masculinity, your manhood, resides within, in that place where we go when we meditate and we attempt to touch the most sacred part of ourselves. Thank you.